A crew member was resting in the cabin. He heard a strange noise coming from under the bed. He hurriedly put his head to check the situation. Suddenly, it's another movie that's perfect for a meal. Anyone with a poor appetite will definitely feel ravenous after watching delicious pig brain sashimi. However, this is just an appetizer. The old man felt invigorated and alert after eating it. However, the onlookers screamed like pigs in fright. The old man exploded without even realizing what was happening. It seems to be food poisoning, and another boy had also stolen food. Everyone was so scared that they quickly locked him in a cage. But the boy argued that he hadn't stolen any food. In the next moment, why did the two of them mutate? And where did the monsters come from? Today, let's watch together the sci-fi horror film released 10 years ago, Harbinger Down. Without further ado, let's begin the story. In 1982, above the Arctic Circle, a Soviet lunar exploration spacecraft encountered an accident. A large amount of unidentified liquid appeared inside the spacecraft. It then plummeted rapidly, and ultimately went missing. A few years later, the girl SETI contacted a temporary research team to conduct research on marine life in the Bering Sea, in order to complete her studies. Then, they boarded SETI's grandfather's fishing boat. However, these people seemed unreliable. They could argue over the smallest things. Fortunately, there were people SETI knew among them. That included her mentor Stephen, and her classmate Helen. After assigning rooms, the others fell asleep. SETI went to the fishing boat to say goodnight to her grandfather. Then she climbed into bed to prepare for sleep. Suddenly, the computer emitted an alarm. She thought it was a target organism, the beluga whale. SETI excitedly ran to call Helen, but Helen was sleeping, and wouldn't wake up no matter what. SETI had to look for others. She found that everyone else was fast asleep as well. SETI helplessly went to the deck to set up the equipment. Using the underwater camera, she discovered several beluga whales. However, strangely, something in the ice was emitting a bright light. So SETI hurriedly found her grandfather, but he also didn't know what could be glowing. Grandpa directly pulled the chunk of ice up. At this moment, the others who were awakened all gathered around. They curiously gazed at the novel object before them. Someone speculated that this thing drifted over from a nuclear power plant. Then everyone excitedly turned on their flashlights. They discovered that there was something wrapped inside. So Stephen ordered the ice block to be smashed. Stephen guessed that they might have discovered a new species. Eager to take credit, he quickly took out his camera, excitedly introducing his new discovery. He didn't even mention the names of the others. Then he suggested that Grandpa should pull up more ice blocks. Maybe there are other unknown creatures nearby. At this moment, the others smashed open the ice block. SETI cautiously stepped forward to check the situation. To her surprise, she found a control panel inside. Then Grandpa crawled inside. He discovered that it was the wreckage of a manned spacecraft. It appeared to be from the Soviet era. Upon hearing that they had found such a treasure, Stephen instantly got excited. He told everyone that he was a mentor. The wreckage of the spacecraft should belong to him. Bringing it back to school would be a great achievement. When Grandpa heard this, he instantly became displeased. He stated that if that were the case, Russia would definitely want it back. Unexpectedly, the other party replied that the Soviet Union no longer existed. What right do they have to demand it back? Grandpa hurriedly fought for his granddaughter's interests. He stated that according to international salvage law, whoever salvages it owns it, so the spacecraft should belong to him and his granddaughter. Moreover, the entire ship was his. He would decide who the items belonged to immediately after. To prevent Stephen from having any more ideas about the wreckage, Grandpa quickly put the items away. But this didn't stop the others. They sneaked into the room where the wreckage was placed, while Grandpa was sailing. Inside, they found a corpse, just as the black boy was captivated by the sight. The black boy was startled. The few who have played enough would go back and focus on their own things. On the other side, Stephen was unhappy that the wreckage didn't belong to him, so he sought out SETI. Stephen wanted her to hand over the wreckage to him, seeing that she was unmoved. He even threatened her using his position as a mentor. If SETI focused only on making a name for herself, he would find ways to ensure she couldn't graduate. Seeing her former mentor as a fraud, SETI was very speechless. Fortunately, the others weren't falling for Stephen's tricks. They quickly stepped in to help stop Stephen, and urged SETI to go study the wreckage first. Immediately after, SETI and her new acquaintance Sarah arrived at the wreckage. They briefly checked, and found nothing unusual, so SETI put on gloves, and removed the astronaut's helmet. But strangely, the charred astronaut had not been burned to death. On the other side, Stephen was still trying to brainwash the others. He hoped a few of them would support him, but they were completely unmoved. Stephen had to chat about other things. Then he sneaked out when no one was watching. Meanwhile, Seti cut open the body and found that all the blood vessels on the astronaut's body were protruding, which was very terrifying. It appeared that a sudden illness had taken his life. She then took some samples to examine under the microscope. Kevin came to check on the progress. Seti remarked that it was too strange. The spacecraft had shattered, yet the astronaut's body inside was completely intact. Through observing the samples, Seti discovered an unknown type of cell she had never seen before. It resembled the highly resilient tardigrade. Seti then conducted further research on this. She found that the astronaut's body was filled with these cells. On the other side, Stephen also arrived at the wreckage. In order to quickly investigate the situation, he directly touched the body without gloves. Then Stephen took photos with his tablet. Meanwhile, Sarah, feeling bored, actively provoked the burly man. The burly man has never been insulted like this before. He directly pinned her against the wall. Seeing she couldn't win, Sarah fled in panic. However, everyone was unaware that the ice encasing the wreckage had melted. Something inside had escaped. A crew member was resting in the cabin. He suddenly heard strange noises coming from under the bed, and hurriedly leaned down to check. Suddenly. Meanwhile, Stephen was still trying to cause trouble for Seti. He accused Seti of illegal sampling. Stephen could easily use this to convict her. At that point, she would definitely be unable to graduate. Seti didn't understand these things. Grandpa, who was nearby, was also intimidated into silence. In the end, the two had to hand over the wreckage. Then the group went to the room where the wreckage was stored. To their shock, they found that the body was missing. Stephen believed it must be Seti's doing. He cursed, claiming that even if she didn't want him to have the wreckage, she didn't have to go to such extremes. Seti was confused by this. She quickly explained that she hadn't done anything like that. At this moment, Grandpa stepped in to defend his granddaughter. He stated that Seti had been busy the whole time. How could she possibly have had time to hide a body? Upon hearing this, Stephen found it somewhat reasonable. But how could the body be missing? This was a golden opportunity for fame and recognition. Stephen declared that he would find the body no matter what. Then he had everyone gather to retrieve the body. At this moment, Stephen suddenly ran out onto the deck. Outside, the wind howled and snow fell in torrents. Yet he was flushed and shouting that he was hot. Then Stephen began to strip off his clothes. Everyone rushed over to help him. They helped Stephen back into the cabin. Suddenly, he let out a piercing scream. In the next moment, watching the grotesque and terrifying Stephen explode, everyone was so frightened that they couldn't move. Strangely, Stephen suddenly came to life. It scattered and fled as if it had grown legs. No one had ever seen anything like this. They didn't dare to approach to see what was happening. Helen was so terrified that she cried, but Seti was quite brave. She picked up a glass and grabbed a chunk of meat. Then the group worked together to quickly freeze the meat chunk with liquid nitrogen. After that, Seti took a sample from the meat and placed it under the microscope to observe. She discovered that same unknown cell again, seeing it not moving and raising the temperature a bit. This time, the unknown cells were noticeably more active than before. Moreover, they were rapidly reproducing. Seti speculated that this cell's reproduction required energy. Stephen must have accidentally touched it, which ultimately drained him of heat and caused his death. It was clear that the people on the ship were in danger now. If they didn't find a way to deal with it, they would surely meet the same fate as Stephen. Panic spread among the group. At this moment, Grandpa was leading a search for the missing crew members. He discovered that one of them had been swallowed by the monster. Worse, the monster had noticed them. The crew member prepared to fight back, but was ensnared by a tentacle. Grandpa hurried over to help. On the other side, the group was discussing what to do next. Grandpa brought up the matter of the monster. Upon learning that there was a monster on the ship, everyone became extremely anxious. At this moment, Grandpa suggested using seawater and liquid nitrogen to refreeze the monster. Upon hearing this, they quickly sprang into action. They made their way to the room where the monster was located. They found that it was enjoying its meal. Several people splashed seawater onto the monster. Then they quickly sprayed liquid nitrogen, successfully freezing it. Just when they thought the danger was over, they suddenly heard a commotion. They followed the noise to the deck and found Sarah had locked up the black boy. She was even planning to burn him alive. The others asked what was going on. Sarah claimed she had seen with her own eyes when Stephen exploded. Blood splattered into the black boy's mouth. He had definitely been infected, but the others didn't believe her at all. They even began to wrestle with Sarah for the knife. The black boy suddenly screamed in agony. Fortunately, Sarah had a backup plan. She pulled out a flare gun and quickly ended the black boy's life. Then Sarah stopped pretending. She revealed that she was a spy. Her mission was to investigate whether the items brought back from Soviet secret research were dangerous. They were worried about this happening before, so they didn't rush to salvage it. Now that they knew of the monster's existence, she had already notified her nearby teammates to come pick her up. After she left, she would blow up the fishing boat. At that point, all the informed individuals would die with the secret. After all, freezing was only a temporary measure. Burning it was the only way to ensure the monster wouldn't come back to harm anyone. At this moment, the pipe suddenly began to ooze a mysterious liquid. Then a tentacle emerged. Yet no one noticed this happening. They were all busy condemning Sarah for not caring about their lives. Suddenly, the tentacle reached Sarah's side. Fortunately, she reacted quickly and dodged it. But Helen wasn't so lucky. She was bitten by the monster and dragged into the pipe. No one expected the monster to be able to contort its body like that. Sarah tried to escape, but she was caught by the burly man and asked where the bomb was hidden. Just a moment ago, Sarah had been mocking him, but suddenly, the burly man stood frozen in place. At this moment, Kevin rushed over with liquid nitrogen on his back, but it was already too late. Then they found the bomb in the cabin. At the same time, they discovered that the entire ship had been taken over by the monster. Unknown cells were breeding everywhere. The group struggled hard to dismantle the bomb. Just then, the monster noticed them. They were so frightened that they fled. Said he wanted to go retrieve the bomb. Kevin returned and ran out with Seti. The burly man grabbed the monster's tentacle and forcefully shoved it back. He hurriedly closed the door. However, before he could catch his breath, they discovered that Grandpa had blood splattered in his mouth. Seti stood frozen, not knowing what to do, but Grandpa silently left the cabin in order not to harm his granddaughter. At this moment, Sarah's walkie-talkie crackled to life. Seti angrily scolded her through the radio. She informed them that Sarah was already dead. Then the group went to the deck. Grandpa, who was also there, hoped that they could freeze him, but before that, he wanted the burly man to fix the engine first. Then they could ram the ship into an iceberg to trap the monster. But Grandpa's decision put the burly man at risk. The burly man was diligently repairing the engine. At this moment, a monster suddenly appeared behind him. Seeing the terrifying creature, the burly man hurriedly grabbed his knife to defend himself. He eventually managed to bring it down. The burly man finally succeeded in fixing the engine, but the monster wasn't completely dead. It launched a surprise attack from behind, piercing the burly man's body. On the other side, Grandpa could no longer hold on. After bidding farewell to his granddaughter, he asked Kevin to freeze him with liquid nitrogen. Kevin took a long time to mentally prepare himself. Finally, when he decided to take action, he was killed by the monster's tentacle. At this moment, Seti in the cockpit saw Kevin meet a gruesome fate. She realized that something had gone wrong with Grandpa, so she returned to the cabin to check on the situation. At this moment, Grandpa urged Seti to freeze the ship. She must not let the monster escape. Quickly, Seti adjusted the course toward the iceberg. Suddenly, the monster spotted her. Seti was so scared that she crawled out of the cockpit and onto the deck. The monster revealed its true form, wanting to devour the last living creature. At this moment, the fishing boat collided with the iceberg. The monster was successfully frozen. Fortunately, Seti found a walkie-talkie nearby. She contacted the Dutch Harbor Coast Guard through the frequency. In the end, Seti was successfully rescued. The film concludes here. The movie did a good job of creating a horror atmosphere. The monster appeared quite frequently. However, the opening of the film lacks novelty. The plot was rather drawn out. If there was a walkie-talkie, why not contact the police earlier? It was only brought out after everyone was dead. Many shots were shaky and dark. Overall, the viewing experience was very poor. I wouldn't recommend watching the original film. If you like my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Your support is the greatest encouragement for me.